Hello and welcome to Perth US Asia webinar Defending Multilateralism in 2022, Views from Indonesia, Thailand and Cambodia. My name is Dr. Huong and I'm Principal Fellow at Perth US Asia Center, and I lead research projects related to strategy and security issues with particular interest in Southeast Asia. Today, I'm very excited to have an excellent panel joining me to unpack complexities in the multilateral environment, especially that the summit season is approaching in a couple of weeks. This year, we have 3 Southeast Asian ASEAN members that have leadership roles in regional and global institutions, Indonesia hosting the G20, Thailand APEC, and Cambodia ASEAN and East Asia Summit and other ASEAN bilateral summits. So small and middle powers in Southeast Asia have always bet on multilateralism, but the current conditions, one could argue, are not very conducive for multilateral cooperation and has been highly politicized. Despite the enthusiasm that we have, first time in-person summits coming back after a few years of pandemic, there is a big, long shadow of politicization of participants in this year's summits. There are mounting issues that require multilateral cooperation and actually more of cooperation than ever. Yet a lot of this year's focus has been on attendance, who is coming and who is not. For example, with particularly with the war in Ukraine that started earlier this year, now that the countries like US and certain countries in the West and its allies impose sanctions on Russia and put pressure on Indonesia as a host not to invite Putin to the summit. Things like that are making the job of a host much harder. And up until now, we only have update that the US President Joe Biden will attend the G20 summit in Bali and US ASEAN summit as well as East Asia summit, but he will skip APEC, sending Vice President Kamala Harris instead. So those are just issue of attendance, but aside of that, there's also ever-growing competitions, if not decoupling efforts between the US and China, certainly not making multilateral cooperation any easier. It is a tough job for Southeast Asian countries, especially those that have been waiting to exercise and showcase their diplomatic agency through this leadership year. So for us to see this effort along this year to be challenged is actually one of bigger trouble for the hosting countries. Not only external challenges are there are also internal challenges within, for example, ASEAN grouping itself, not to mention the Myanmar crisis is deteriorating, to which last week ASEAN foreign ministers meeting acknowledged that the situation has no progress and disappointing in fact that they're nowhere close to the 5-point consensus that they've reached earlier on, nor any substantial progress, for example, in the negotiations of a code of conduct in the South China Sea. The list goes on, but to help us unpack all those challenges, but also see through the opportunities that the host countries can actually seize in this year, I have 3 excellent panelists joining me today to unpack individual positions and priorities of those countries. Maria Monica Vidhadia is a visiting fellow at the Yusof Ishak Institute and a former World Bank expert. She has also previously worked in the office of Executive Office of President of the Republic of Indonesia, and a senior advisor for Deputy Chief of Staff in charge of strategic and economic issues. She will speak to us about Indonesia's G20 presidency. Dr. Kayo Pitak Dumrongkit, sorry, It's a head and assistant professor at the Center of Multilateral Studies at S. Rajaratnam's School of International Studies in Singapore. Karen is a very well-published scholar, especially when it comes to the regional economic governance dynamics. But most importantly, she is also our Indo-Pacific Fellow from last year. So we are very particularly happy for her to join us again. And she will speak about Thai's position as a host of APEC this year. Charlene Peach is Deputy Executive Director of Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace and in charge of research, training, and publications. And concurrently is serving as a coordinator for Global Center for Mekong Studies. She's also very well published and frequent panelist to the global discussions. I have not given any panelists full justice, so please refer to the full bio in the description. But just to get us started, I will start with more global outlook and moving through the regional to local. So we'll start with Monica, then Carol and Shardine. So Monica, the mic is yours.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to everyone here. Thank you, Huong, for the kind introduction. So, my name is Monica. I'm a visiting fellow at the IC's Yusof Ishak Institute, and I just would like to make a short disclaimer that I will be talking based on my personal views, and I'm not representing any government or any institutes. So let me begin my remarks about G20 presidency this year. Unlike the UN system, which is the ultimate global formal multilateral system, the G20 is an informal but important club of major nations where there is neither a constitutions nor a secretariat, and there are no voting rules where decisions are adopted by consensus. The G20 and its leader summit were initiated in 1999 and 2008, respectively, against the backdrop of major world economic crisis, as many of us know. By 2009, the G20 summit was recognized as the premier forum for international economic cooperation to coordinate monetary and fiscal policies, as well as address major strategic issues related to the global economy. Its leverage to the leaders level involved not only major economic powers, but also emerging markets and developing economies. And this inclusion of emerging markets and developing economies shows that many of extraordinary and strategic global economic issues can no longer be solved by developed countries alone, and the global economic issues have global spillovers. So what are Indonesia's priorities in 2022 G20 presidency? When Indonesia took the 2022 G20 presidency from Italy, the global economy was on its path towards recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The recovery phase from the pandemic, however, has been largely uneven across and within countries and across different social, economic, and demographic groups. Most disadvantaged countries and segments of the populations have limited access to vaccines that is essential to prevent the spread of the virus and essential to support a sustained global economic recovery. Low-income countries were more exposed economically. More vulnerable households had jobs that require more physical presence, so they are hit more severely, while smaller firms were less likely to adopt digital technologies to help them survive during the pandemic. Indeed, the pandemic has glaringly put on the spotlight the pre-existing fractures and fault lines in our multilateral system and highlighted the indispensable role for a global set of rules and intervention, as well as institutions and actions. Against this backdrop, Indonesia chose this year's theme, Recover Stronger, Recover Together. And there are three main pillars under the Indonesia's G20 presidency. The first one is global health infrastructure. Second one is inclusive digital transformation. And third one is energy transition. Indonesia is working hard to deliver concrete outcomes under the three priority agenda for its G20 presidency. By concrete here, I mean collaboration on certain initiatives, projects, and coming up with pools of resources. But this also means more selfishly what the summit could bring to Indonesia in terms of investment. For example, Indonesia is expected to secure a multi-billion-dollar clean energy partnership with some rich countries when it hosts the summit in Bali. When the war in Ukraine broke out in February, Indonesia had to recalibrate its agenda of its G20 presidency. The protracted war in Ukraine has stoked rising food, energy, and fertilizer prices, all global shocks to which the G20 must respond. Extreme weathers because of climate change has further contributed to rising food prices and food insecurity as well as population displacement. But the war in Ukraine has not only created a global economic shock, but also created a highly multipolarized world and fractured the multilateral system and spirit, which were already so much weakened even before the war. The zero-sum paradigm transcends a whole gamut of economic areas and cripples our ability to build global economic cooperation when it's most needed. Economic sanctions from finance, food, energy, technology have become new weapons of the modern world. Suddenly, the world economy is spiraling into multiple economic crises and geopolitical tensions, which have completely severed the path towards recovery from the pandemic with no certainties in the near future. Given this background, global food security and energy rise up the G20 agenda. So does the agenda to strengthen multilateralism, which was discussed in the foreign ministers meeting or the Sherpa track 1 or 2 months ago. So, and what are the main challenges to achieve these objectives that Indonesia's presidency has set up? I will mention three main challenges to achieve objective of this year's G20 presidency. The first one is that the global issues that we are dealing with have become more convoluted. That makes multilateral cooperation becomes more indispensable, but which also means that compartmentalizing issues could mean a progress in one area, but backtracking in others. For example, food security and climate change are inseparable, but they are discussed under different frameworks. Increased temperature and rainfall as a result of climate change affect the output of major crops by as much as 25%, but at the same time, the world's food system contributes around 25 to 30% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, equivalent to or even larger than all of electricity generations globally. There will be also increasing tensions between food and energy security, such as in the area of biofuel. Moreover, division between short-term and long-term timeline has become blurred. Climate change is an epitome. The Indonesia's G20 presidency has therefore needs to address both short-term and long-term issues. It needs to deliver sustained long-term strategies, frameworks, and institutions to address the underlying causes of the multiple large-scale structural problems the global economy is confronting today, on top of being a firefighter to so many global economic shocks. The implications of this is first, the need to ensure that policies and funding to address issues that are connected must be synergistic. The G20 may need to move from funding initiatives that are focused on specific issues to funding initiatives that are focused on specific results. The last finance ministers and central bank governors meeting this month has come up with many funding initiatives, including the $1.4 billion pandemic prevention, preparedness and response financial intermediary fund, the Resilience and Sustainability Trust targeted at $100 billion to help low-income countries addressing long-term challenges, including climate change, pandemics, and macroeconomic risk. The Global Climate Fund targeted at $100 billion per year until 2025 to address the needs of developing countries to meet their climate change goals. The Global Financial Safety Net to help emerging countries and developing economies deal with the spillover effects of microeconomic policies from advanced economies, which have put many emerging markets and developing economies subject to capital flows and exchange rate volatility. These are to name a few. This initiative must be synergistic in how there must be synergies in how these funds are managed. And because of the scale and complexity of global challenges we face today, the G20 needs to make strategic investment in the scale of trillions of dollars and not billions of dollars, like the initiative above. Of course, some are better than nothing. Billions are better than nothing. But even to make the G20 members commit to contribute to some of these funds is already difficult. My second point is the fact that the G20 relies on many of the Bretton Woods institutions, including the WTO, the IMF, the World Bank, to implement their initiatives. These Bretton Woods institutions are not without weaknesses in terms of their governance and representations. Without meaningful reforms of these international financial intermediaries in terms of their governance and representations, this unsustainable governance problem could erode people's trust on these organizations and move the world further into a bipolar structure and seriously diminish the global role of these institutions. And my third point is that diverging views and competing norms among G20 member countries, but especially between Western countries and China and Russia, will make the goal to create global norms, standards, and principles, such as in the area of data privacy, AI, cybersecurity, biotechnologies, elusive. We can expect more and more lowest common denominator agreements at the G20. And this year's summit may be the first summit that the G20 will have without issuing a communique. Regional and, sorry?
Thank you, Monica,
Okay,
for highlighting the priorities and challenges and giving some prediction. I'll save your further prediction for the Q&A session so that we can move on with other panelists. I also asked similar questions. What are the priorities? How have they been challenged? And how are the host countries trying to overcome these? So next we'll move to Kao, who will talk about the APEX priorities.
Thank you very much, Huong. And I would like to express my thanks again to the Perth US Asia Center for inviting me to speak again at your timely and important webinar. So maybe first of all, I'd like to start my presentation by walking you through quickly about the Thai priorities as an APEC host this year, and then talk about the geopolitics tensions, and then what would be the likely outcome of this upcoming APEC summit. So Thailand as a host has 8 priorities. So one is trade and investment. So it's looking at how to recover economy from the COVID-19 pandemic. And the second area is finance. This is about talking about digital economy, about how to link all QR code systems together to even facilitate further trade and investment within the bloc. The third one is tourism. This is about reviving tourism, which has been better since the COVID-19 pandemic. The fourth one is agriculture. So this pays attention to food security, which has been becoming more and more important and timely issue for many APEC economies now. And then we have forestry, which is about environmental protection, and then the sixth one is about women empowerment. It talks about inclusiveness, inclusivity, inclusiveness, economic growth. The seventh area is the MSMEs, which is micro, small, medium enterprises. which is, again, talking more about the inclusiveness going forward, because the majority of the firms in the APEC economies are MSMEs, right, as we know it. And last but not least, the last priority for Thailand as a whole is health. So how can you ensure economies are moving forward by also safeguarding health of the population as well, right? So these 8 priorities become the theme of Thailand this year, which is open, connect, and balance, right? So let me recap on the themes. So open involves deepening economic integration and supporting the rule-based multilateral trading system, right? So it could be, about abolishing trade hurdles or ensuring resilience in trade in essential medical goods, right? And advancing talks toward the free trade agreement of the Asia Pacific, or FTAAP in short. So connect, what does connect mean? So connect involves reviving, restoring cross-border movement of people, right? And also restoring the tourism and service sectors across APEC, as well as ensuring that health security is there, as well as the country reconnect after the pandemic. Last but not least, balance is about working together to obtain sustainable and inclusive growth. This can be achievable by, boosting women's economic empowerment and entrepreneurship, as well as promoting the bio-circular green economic model, or BCG model that we know it. So a little bit on BCG. So it has 3 parts, right? Bio, circular, and green. So bio involves the use of technology and innovation to add value to the agricultural products and raw materials. Circular means reusing and recycling resources. And green part means using resources to reduce pollution as well as preserve the environment. So for all the 3 parts, open, connect, and balance, I think you've seen from the news now that Thailand has been emphasizing the balance part of this theme, right? Because if you know from reading the news, Thailand has been giving incentive even before it became an APEC host, giving incentive to promote BCG model for a long time. For example, the Board of Investment of Thailand has been given incentive to foreign investors to invest in bio or agriculture-based sector, and it gives tax reduction to those who do recycling, and also some incentives given toward those who embark on green technology. Also, just to give you the number for the past 7 years, BOI has received the applications for investment in BCG activities worth $21 billion. So as you can see, Thailand is really practicing the BCG model, and it wants to push forward this BCG model so that it can be applicable to other APEC economies as well. In terms of challenges, I think the biggest challenges as a host this year is geopolitics, right? Because this year has been rife with geopolitical tension and conflict. For example, the US-China rivalry, which is predated this year, but it has been intensified on many fronts, right? So you can see that, the Trump era tariffs are still intact. The CFIUS, or the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, has been empowered, and it can definitely go after the Chinese acquisition of the American firms, right? And recently, the US has been just passed the CHIPS Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, in August, which is indicative of the U.S. attempt to curb China's rise in the technological field. Right? Not only is about conflict between the major powers, right? So we've seen conflict between major power and we call middle power as well, like the bilateral ties between China and Australia was at a very low level, despite some efforts to reset it, right? Also, we also still have the South China Sea as a regional flashpoint, as some APEC economies are claimants to this case, and there's some tension has been growing, right, in recent year, and the dispute has still not been resolved until today. Last but not least, we also have the Ukraine-Russia war and its ripple effect on commodity and food price inflation, right? Which actually put countries in conflict with each other, right? For example, some APEC economies join Western sanction against Russia, while others adopting neutral stand or even continue to purchase Russian goods, right? Levels at the United Nations also differ. And as we know, the war has fueled the commodity and food price surges. So the food security concern become imminent for some APEC economies. So they impose ban or impose restriction on their food and commodity export, right? Which actually causing tension between the sellers and buyers in APEC, right? So as you can see, so it's this intensifying geopolitics has posed challenges to the Thai host, and we've seen the signs coming out. For example, in May, when the ministry responsible for trade meeting was organized, we have 5 economies of APEC walk out to protest the Russian invasion of Ukraine, right? And these 5 economies actually issued a joint release condemning Russian invasion. So this meeting produced no joint statement. And this pattern repeated itself at the finance minister meeting last month on 19 to 20 October, right? When we see there's no joint statement being given due to the differences in opinion on the Ukraine-Russian war. So it seems to me that there's a high probability that there will be no joint leaders declaration again at this upcoming APEC summit. But I don't think we shouldn't be too discouraged by having no leaders declaration because the grouping previously was unable to coin this joint statement before in 2018 and 2019, but we still see the regional economic deepening progresses, right? And just to give you, yes, Huong.
Similar pattern and similarities can be drawn from what Monica and yourself presented, Carol, because all those priorities are important and very practical and actually requires cooperation, but geopolitics have intruded and seems more so this year than before. And similarly, we might have the challenges of coming up with a joint statement. I'll leave your further remarks about how to overcome that to the Q&A sessions. And this is a good reminder for all our audience that you can submit questions via chat function to interact with our speakers. And please think of the questions as I move to Shardine, who will talk about the challenges for ASEAN this year, and of course, other ASEAN-related summits. Similarly, there will be practical challenges and obviously the geopolitics looming large, but also there are issues internally, including the Myanmar crisis. So Shardine, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Huong. It's a great pleasure to be in this first webinar. It's my first time, and thank you, Huong, for the excellent invitation. As ASEAN is happening next, ASEAN summits, the 40 and 41st ASEAN summit will be happening next week, actually in Phnom Penh. Before I walk through all the questions, priority, challenges, and all that, on the logistic fronts, there is a reason why all of these 3 summits happening all at the same time frame. The reason is because, of course, there's a lot of negotiation backdoor at the technical level, and the idea is to have world leader traveling to region just once time off, and then at least the bigger part, the majority of them don't have to go back to their regions back and forth. So it's a good thing, logistic wise, but also strategically, it's important in the sense that all these 3 are somehow very much connected and aligned. Now, I think at the basically by now everyone could have familiar themselves with ASEAN, a theme this year, which is ACT, meaning addressing challenges together. This theme was set at having post-pandemic in mind, in the sense that let's recover all together, but addressing every other challenges. The thing is, when the theme was set out, we didn't expect Myanmar crisis to be this deteriorating. We didn't expect that there would be Russia-Ukraine war could happen. We don't expect many other things going this tough for this year. So if I were to look into, just share with you some of the priority area that Cambodia, as a chair, is looking into, is of course the three main pillars of ASEAN, which is ASEAN Political Security Community, ASEAN Economic Community, and ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. If that being said, for instance, when you look at political security pillar, some other things that worth highlighting is the fact that we're now reviewing the ASEAN Community post 2025 vision and sustainable development, having co-chair with Malaysia. Other things, and many people would question this, but one of the priority is to strengthen ASEAN centrality in the ASEAN-led mechanism. And people, because of things that are happening in the region, many people look at ASEAN centrally, like what it really is, and questioning the effectiveness or relevance of ASEAN centrality at large. But this remained one of our core themes, and having putting ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific on the backbone, looking to elevate ASEAN centrality further. Other than that, would also be one of the high on the agenda would also be women, peace, and security agenda. This has been one of the things that we've been promoting since our host of ASEM last year, and this is going to be continue on. Timor-Leste applications for ASEAN membership is also another priority, where we actually initially seek to expedite the process. But there's no guarantee. We were not sure whether we can succeed in having Timor-Leste membership acceded to ASEAN this year yet. But this is at least initially it was part of the main priority to have ASEAN 11. Other thing, if you look at ASEAN Economic Community pillar, it's not that different from other priority, from what our panelists have mentioned earlier, the priority of APEC and G20, which is to promote inclusive post-COVID-19 ASEAN community, strengthening ASEAN competitiveness and regional integration. And with that, we're trying to utilize the existing free trade agreement that we have, but also ensuring effective implementation of the RCEP. And we're looking to deepening more ASEAN growth and prosperity together by linking the previous ASEAN initiative that have been on the table. As for ASEAN socio-cultural community, we're looking into enhancing ASEAN value, awareness and identity, promote empowerment both women and youth, and enhancing well-being of ASEAN. But given the pandemic, social protections for the people is also high on the agenda. But last but not least is the institutional capacity and effectiveness of whatever been rolling out through the proportions of institution. So this is a quick overview of the priority. Now, when it comes to challenges, it's not that different that the world is facing. The major power rivalry remains intensified. Russia-Ukraine is a hot topic. Myanmar political crisis does not show sign of improvement. Cambodia asked our foreign ministers as a special envoys of ASEAN to Myanmar, looking into trying to, in all possible way to, we did not attempt to interfere and stop the war in any case, but at least as the chair, also as a special envoys, think Cambodia has done a good deed in many ways, but one of the main outcome would be extending humanitarian support and assistance to people of Myanmar. Still, I'm aware that there are regional observer and medias and stuff looking into and saying that the issues is not deteriorating. Does that mean we fail as the chairs and stuff? And I think this is a bit unfair because it's a political crisis of a country. You cannot stop it in a day, and you should question the people, the authority on the ground, whether or not there is a will to end this war, this crisis on the ground. So long as your attempts and you're willing to settle down, then they would open up for more support and more help needed. But if you don't have the internal political will, there's no point that you open up for others to help. So these are the main three key issues. Of course, South China Sea remain ongoing negotiations. It's been already in the second reading, and I would say the progress is quite well. Other than that, if I were to zoom in and look into how can Cambodia best navigate the issues, I would quote our Prime Minister saying the other day after the conclusions of AMM, saying that we have at least three main issues to deal with geopolitically, actually, during the AMM, and we managed to finish up the joint the AMM or the paper, the joint consent. So it's a huge move, but also a lot of compromises, I would say, with people negotiating. But let's hope that the same momentums continue, because this summit this year would be intensified than ever, I would say. But on top of that, on the positive notes, it's not just a summit, but we also have the second ASEAN Global Dialogue with the attendance of major international organizations, including UN, IMF, ADB, World Bank. So those are sort of things which at the sideline of the summits, hopefully to lighten up the situation a little bit and bring more positive and prosperous outcomes to the region, if any case happen to the hard issues during the negotiation stage of the summit itself. So I'll stop here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Jardine. Yeah, indeed, it's been a whole year of hard work for all the hosts, and not just the summit, but obviously we'll be paying a lot of attention as that accumulates, the efforts accumulates in a couple of weeks. I guess the similar theme that comes from all your presentations has been that there is a question of political will, really, not agenda, not mission, not priorities, not framework, or even the routine of those multilateral arrangements and summit, but it goes really to the question of political will of major powers. So how smaller and middle-sized countries can augment and support and defend multilateralism? How can they overcome that challenges that simply are posed by several major powers, right? And then I would like to bind that question with another one, which often goes along with it, is multilateralism going forward continue to be under challenge given the major powers' different political wheels now? And in this case, if you agree with that, are minilateral arrangements more attractive, easier to manage, and even perhaps likely to replace the extensive, inclusive multilateral gatherings? And I'd like to hear your views from all of you. And meantime, again, inviting our audience to submit the question via chat function. So why don't we go around? Jardine, you go first, and then Kyle, and then Monica. What do you think about the future of multilateralism?
When it comes to, at some point, I do agree with you that minilateralism slowly and gradually trying to replace multilateralism at large. But in some part of the world, especially I would say in Southeast Asia, minilateralism do both harm and good. I was speaking from the Mekong, having Mekong in the back of my mind. Yes. There are like at least 10 sub-regional cooperation in on the Mekong. I mean, at least the riparian country of the 5 Mekong country does benefit hugely from it, economically, but socially at large. But there is a bigger question, so are you benefit politically? Because it appears that they begin to compete rather than, I mean, the external power or the external partner with the Mekong, they tend to be more competitive for one another rather than for the goodwill of the sub-regional or the riparian Mekong country itself. If you do have goodwill, is there a way to synergy at all? Which I see none. Because and then let's say the external partner imposing certain initiative and mechanism at your own front and aside from others. So at some point it pressure the riparian country to choose, or if you're really good at trying to capture all benefit at once, that's fine. But people kind of lose sight of the political angles of it, which getting me worried when it comes to multilateralism. In that sense, I'm not sure if that loophole itself could in any way be replaced or be substituted by multilateralism cooperation, if at all. Now, I've heard from many of my Mekong colleagues that they, at first, when they started out, Mekong sub-regional cooperation was supposed to just focus on economic and development. Now they bring in every sort of issues into the table, connecting to political pole, including trying to exclude Myanmar from taking part in and all of Mekong-related meeting. But although initial plan was, okay, it's for economics, there's nothing political, there's nothing, so there shouldn't be a problem. But now everything is pushing to political. So everything is being politicized, and that's the downside of it.
Okay, thank you, Huong, for the question. So my take is that multilateralism is indeed under challenge by minilateralism, but as Geraldine said, that the minilateral platforms or forum can cause harm as well, right? So one thing is that they can become exclusive clubs, right? So we can risk, fragmenting the system further if we rely solely on minilateralism as opposed to multilateralism, right? And speaking about APEC, which is an economic forum, and I don't think in terms of economic structure that we have now, the world is now characterized by transnational supply chains. So we cannot evade multilateralism, right? We need multilateral governance so that countries can align their rules or maybe adopt the same rules going forward as supply chains that become transnational. Right? And one more thing I just want to add about APEC. Thailand as a host for APEC is that what Thailand sees is that, and as we know, APEC is a non-binding platform, right? Meaning that the cooperation is voluntary. But this could be seen in a positive light as well, because APEC can be seen as a platform. This is non-binding, meaning that the participants can voice frankly their concerns and talk frankly or candidly about how to arrive at the joint solutions to tackle economic or economic related issues, right? And last but not least, we should not forget that APEC has a private sector arm called the APEC Business Advisory Council, right? So this is a mechanism that built into APEC to give advice, give recommendations to the APEC leader meeting, right? So, and as you know, the private sector has this ABAC, the Business Advisory Council consists of both large and small and medium enterprises as well. So this can give the private sector a channel to communicate with the government that even though we have a tight geopolitical tensions going on in the world, we have to focus also on deepening economic integration, right, despite the conflicts among economies right now. So I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Monica?
Sure. I think in terms of your questions, how Indonesia's G20 presidency has been navigating the current geopolitical challenges to multilateralism, right? As we all know, Indonesia has rejected and deflected the persuasion by many G7 countries to disinvite Russia to the G20 summit, as you mentioned in the beginning. And in his recent media interview, President Jokowi argued that this inviting Russia will not solve the problems the world needs to solve today. Instead, he wanted to create and facilitate dialogues among warring countries during the summit in Bali. So instead of this inviting Russia, Indonesia invited Ukraine. And I think this has preserved the G20 unity amidst the geopolitical challenges. And I think in terms of what Indonesia can do, I think the staunch of foreign policy positions of Indonesia, but also more importantly, perhaps ASEAN, right, not to take side in the increasingly multipolarized geopolitical landscape, where any miscalculation and mishap will lead to full-blown war that could be continued. And leveraging on its standing in the world, core interest in multilateral agreements, non-alignment stance, and central role in ASEAN, I think Indonesia has a lot of role to play in contributing to preserving and strengthening multilateralism. However, more proactive foreign policies and more outward-looking economic agenda by Indonesia could help Indonesia position itself as a real champion of multilateralism. And in regard to the future of multilateralism, I think given the expected continuing U.S.-China rivalry for quite a while, I think we could expect that global multilateralism will stay thin. And currently, major powers are acting based on the worst possible scenario that resulted in a lot of distrust among these major nations. And also, I think perhaps more importantly, these major nations are acting also based on domestic pressures that are not easy to change. So given the expected thin global multilateralism, I think regionalism and national policies are better, will continue to coexist with multilateralism, and these regional and national rules are better than no rules at all. And I also would like to just mention one more thing, Huong. There's this term that is called polylateralism, right? The importance of non-state actors in the process of strengthening multilateralism. The roles of academics, business actors, NGOs, philanthropists. I think they are key in the process, although they cannot replace the national states. But these non-state actors, I think, will be important in the process.
Thank you all. And Indonesia will have no break from this year's navigating the geopolitics of great world to next year chairing ASEAN, going back to more local ground. Following up on this thread of thought, I wanted to ask you all as well, your views from your perspective, as well as the countries that you study, about the newly announced the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity that the US government has recently announced. How do you see it complement, or is it actually separate from the existing architecture? Is it something that is welcome or distracting? Is it a signal that because US is not participating in major multilateral trade arrangement, whether it is RCEP or CPTPP, this is a substitute, or what are your expectations towards IPEF, whether they are serving any complementary role to the institutions we are discussing today, or actually are a little bit distracting, while they can be more focused and committed to the existing ones that we are discussing today. So yes, what are your views and expectations about IPEF? Kyle, let's start with you this time.
Thank you, Huong, for the question. Yes, I think as we know, IPEF can be considered maybe the Biden administration trade arm of its Indo-Pacific policy, right? But as we also know as well, IPEF is unlike FTA, which means that the US will not offer its market access, right? But we are seeing that it has been positively welcomed by those who are joining, right? We see and as of now, I think the Canada has expressed its intention to also join IPEF. So I think in years to come, we'll see IPEF being expanded to get other economies in as well. So the critics tend to say that, okay, IPEF, because the US doesn't offer and will not offer its market access, what the value added or contribution or benefits that country will get from IPEF, right? So I can give you one example, which is I think the US now offer the Women's Digital Skill Training Program. So a training program that I think that will train the women in the IPEF emerging economies on digital skills. And I think a bunch of the US tech firms like Google, Visa, Amazon are now joining this scheme. Right? So I think it indicates a good sign that we can get, even though we don't get the additional US market access, we can get assistance from the US as well, and they actually helps, right, in terms of, as we know, we are moving more and more becoming digitalized world, having women empowerment and digital skills is necessary because we can unlock these women's potential and to boost growth and investment in within the IPEF, right? So I think I'll see it as positive and see it's complementing the APEC platform or other economic platform, right, because it adds to more tighten cooperation among states. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Sharadin, Cambodia has not signed to IPEF or at least as yet, nor a couple more of the mainland Southeast Asian countries. So how is that being seen from where you sit, and how ASEAN in general is seeing IPEF, given that it's quite relatively new and we are yet to learn what it concretely can bring to the table?
I think for me personally, I see IPEF as more of a vision rather than any specific framework yet. ASEAN, all ASEAN member states, we do not have one synchronized or one, we do not have the same stand on these issues, or how do we see IPEF. So we all have diverse views, and I think for Cambodia, yeah, we have not signed up to that yet. The thing is, it's not concrete yet. There's no really clear policy as what it could produce spell out there. And so at the moment, they're doing more like a bargaining power to gather more members to sign up for it. And I think for our policy, for Cambodia foreign policy, I guess we do not sign up for something that we are not aware of. And the more we sign up to something we are unsure, the more we're being trapped in sort of an unintended geopolitical competition, I would say, in this part of the region. And for some, I've seen that for some view out there, I read around, and it's appeared that some analysis look at IPEF as like a competitor to a BRI in this part of the region specifically. I'm not sure to what extent this is true. It's debatable at this point, at least. But it doesn't seem that China will sign up anyway. So I think this is the position it will go forward for IPEF.
Thank you. Monica, what do you think about IPEF?
Yes, I think it's a welcome move in the sense that, after a long hiatus during the Trump administration, right now the US is back in a bid to re-engage with the regions economically, right? But again, as the other panelists have said, that it's kind of like a non-traditional trade agreement without offering any market access, right? And also it's early to say what's going to be in there, because a lot of other things are still being negotiated. I think what I would like to mention here is that what as the hard negotiations of IPEF will come later, I think IPEF must avoid precipitating and intensifying the US-China bifurcation in areas such as like technologies, financial services, and supply chains. For example, the potential IPEF standards on data privacy, right, and on cross-border data flows as well as 5G procurement, could diverge from those of China's. And I think what we want to avoid is the risk that IPEF could force some of ASEAN member countries to choose sides in future negotiation. So yeah, that's my take.
Yes, I agree with the market access being one of the biggest assets. And if there is that, then it will naturally become more attractive for countries to join. Monica, if I could stay with you, there is a question
Sure.
from the audience asking, what should India take forward from Indonesia's presidency of G20 next year to resurrect multilateralism? What advice would you give India?
Yeah, I think if there is one thing that one lesson that India could learn from Indonesia's G20 presidency is that we must promulgate and respect the consensus-based principles and rules of the G20 in order to preserve its unity and ensure its ongoing existence, right? And then the other thing is what I've already mentioned earlier, that we like host countries should also lead by examples. I made a points about more proactive foreign policies and also more outward-looking economic agendas for Indonesia. I think the same thing can be said for India, because as we've seen in the news that India has banned exports on wheat and some types of rice that has contributed, or at least not contributing to solving the looming global food crisis.
I might turn this question to you from audience, from our friend Peter Lee, asking what lesson may we draw from the multilateralist grouping in the history when they faced great power rivalry in the 1960s or 20s? Do we have any mechanism today to avoid repeating history of turning into separate blocks as it was once in the history? Do you think we have learned from history?
Okay, the thing is, I'm not a historian, but let me answer this question this way. I think as we all know, that multilateral platform have proliferated like since the end of the World War II, and in East Asia at least, it has proliferated during the 1990s, especially after the Asian financial crisis. I would say that the increasing number of multilateral, or maybe less than that, multilateral or regional platform, are actually there to provide channels for communication for countries to talk. We have APEC as a non-binding platform, so they can share frankly their concerns or opinion. We also have other, maybe other FTA or other binding economic platform that they have that the discussion would eventually become the binding legal agreements. So we have a variety of forums or platform for a country to continue keep their communication warm, and I think that is different from what we see in the past, that we have limited set of platform or channel for country to voice concern or communicate. So I would think that with this multilateral grouping, it depends on countries to pick and choose which one they would like to push. If there's a sensitive issue, they cannot voice their concern in other platforms. They can voice their concern at APEC because it's non-binding, right? So I would think that having more is better for the world than having less or fewer platforms. Thank you.
Certainly worth considering. Geraldine, we are running out of time, but I want to have a last question to you. Obviously, the most attention-grabbing issue is the Myanmar crisis, but along that is also issues of South China Sea. So when Cambodia assumed chairmanship, one of the perhaps goals was to conclude the code of conduct, or at least have a significant progress. I wonder, what is the progress? How do you assess the possibility of concluding anytime soon? Where are we now? Obviously, Cambodia has a lot of pressure on it, given the last chairmanship 10 years ago, that actually the joint communique did come to realization because of the South China Sea issue. So what is the current progress in terms of South China Sea negotiations?
Thank you, Huong. I think in terms of South China Sea negotiations, we've been progressive quite well. I think, as I mentioned, maybe last few months, there was already a second reading being completed at some level in Siem Reap. Now, toward the closer to the summits, I honestly don't know the stage, but at least they have been progressing, and I don't see any signs of staggering. And I personally don't think that we will repeat the same mistake as last 10 years by not having joint communique issued. I think we will manage to have it issued with or without the conclusion of COC.
Certainly hard work for all the hosts that needs to be acknowledged. I'm sorry, I can't go through all the questions because we are running out of time, but good news is that we will follow up with post-summit analysis. So please keep an eye on Perth US Asia website, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for all the speakers for sharing your insights and being with us today. And it's been a pleasure to talk to very informed analysts in the region. Thank you for the audience for joining us, and please follow our activities as we have more exciting events and publications coming along. And finally, thank you for our team behind the scenes to make everything run so smoothly. So once again, thanks Kyle, Monica, and Shardine, and have a good evening. See you next time.